I want to take you back to something that Renee said earlier. She was measuring up for some shower rails, grab rails, and someone asked her how were they going to die? And she was a little bit dumbstruck. And that's exactly why we organised this masterclass, Let's Talk About End of Life. It can be hard for people to talk about end of life. Sometimes it's harder for others. I lost my own mum this year in September, and not to MND, but it was incredibly difficult finding out what her wishes were. And I'd already gone through this process. I know it's my mum and it's different when it's your mum. And I just had to hope that I was doing the best for her and that I got it right, because I didn't really know what she wanted. And it can make life more challenging, and it can make life more challenging for the professionals supporting people with MND as well. So that's why we organise these masterclasses. So by the end of this presentation, I hope you will take away a better understanding of the rationale for why we did it. I'm going to share some of the main learning objectives and also the approach that we used. And then I'll share some of the evaluation feedback and outcomes that resulted from these events. So back in 2016, we did a survey of health and social care professionals to inform our education strategy. And we wanted to identify learning needs. And we had more than 700 people respond to that survey. And it was around half of the 700 that highlighted that palliative and end-of-life care were priority learning needs for them. Also in 2012, we commissioned a report from the Picker Institute. We wanted to explore what people with MND felt about end of life. What did they want from us as the MND Association? And we also asked them to talk to our own staff and volunteers. And one of the recommendations of their report was that clearer information about end of life was needed. So we produced an end of life guide. It was also recommended that there should be improved awareness and training for our own staff, but also for professionals. And as far back as 2013, we actually started asking our membership questions about end of life. You know, what were their experiences? Were they being given opportunities to plan for end of life? And we know even now that that's still not happening in some cases. So we knew there was a need, but how are we going to meet those needs? So we began discussing this with some expert clinicians in palliative care. And on the screen here is Christina Fall, Professor Christina Fall. She's a consultant in palliative medicine with considerable experience supporting people with MND. And she also led the development of a guideline on withdrawal of NIV, so very knowledgeable in this area. Becky Whitaker in the centre there, she is a nurse and end-of-life facilitator and also project manager for a project called Real Talk. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. And then Dr. Idris Baker is a consultant in palliative medicine, also with many years' experience supporting people with MND. And we thought this was important for the audience that we're going to be engaging in these events. End of life can be difficult enough to discuss when you don't have speech and communication issues, but obviously with MND we know that that is part of the package as well. And this group of professionals really knew MND and know MND and kind of know what questions are likely to come up. So it's important to say we began planning these events around a year before they actually happened, so quite a lot of work went into it. We discussed what the key learning objectives should be, and they're on the screen there for you to read. We felt it was really important that professionals understood the dying process, because not all clinicians see that. They're not always involved when a person dies, and we thought it would be helpful. If you are having honest conversations with people, you need to know what happens. So the programme was developed around a three-pronged approach, which considered, what are the practicalities of deterioration and dying? What are the conversations that it would be helpful for people to have? And also, we took into account ethical considerations. We found that some professionals were scared of going there because they weren't quite sure whether they were going to say the right thing or, tell somebody something that was illegal. So that was a really important factor. So we held 6 events across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and it was the masterclass model is something that we've used previously for other topics, and we know that it works. We deliberately limit the numbers to 40 people so that we can have small group work and discussion. And across the 6 events, we had around 200 professionals in total that attended from a range of different professional backgrounds. So we asked them, what's difficult about this? What's challenging? Why do you kind of step back from having these conversations? And these were the things that people told us, and this is just a very small selection. Some people said they were worried about doing more damage by having conversations. Some were fearful that they wouldn't be able to answer people's questions. And managing unrealistic expectations might also be a challenge that would stop them from going there. And similarly, we asked them to consider what might be good about this. What's the benefits of being able to offer opportunities to talk about end of life? And again, there's a few examples on the slide here. So it could help to reduce the fear of the dying process. It could be empowering, and people with MND feel that they actually have a voice. And for others, it could be a relief to talk about this area. Then we had a session about deterioration and dying, and this was a sort of lecture-style presentation looking at the kind of typical progression of MND and what might happen when somebody with MND is dying. And then we moved on to a session about ethics and advanced care planning. And this, I think, was the session that really engaged professionals and kind of had them on the edges of their seats a little bit. The consultants that were delivering the masterclasses shared anecdotes and stories from their own clinical practice about how they approach different situations. And professionals attending the masterclasses were also able to share their own experiences. And they really appreciated being able to hear what other people did, when they were asked tricky questions. So, and there was also opportunity for discussion about different tools, so pro formas or templates for planning ahead, advanced care planning, advanced directive kind of templates, and some books and other resources were shared as well. And then in the afternoon, after lunch, we kind of switched gear a little bit and moved into a more practical session which utilised this tool which is called Real Talk. Now this is based on conversational analysis, and what happened is we showed a series of video clips of real doctor-patient consultations with people with life-limiting conditions, and professionals were invited to really delve into what they saw in those video clips. So what did you see? What did you hear? What was the clinician doing? How did they respond to the person that they were talking to? And then we kind of looked at what the specific techniques and tips were and pulled them out and identified what they were. Now this tool, I just have to say, is currently restricted for use in the classroom with UK health and social care professionals. There are some quite tight ethics around it. But the project team are exploring options to make it more widely available. And I will give you the website link at the end so that you can take a look at the website. And these are some of the techniques that were observed and demonstrated within the Real Talk session. So things like use of gaze, use of silence, asking open questions, using continuous, things like go on, tell me more about that, what does that mean? And fishing questions, probing questions. So these were just some of the things that they kind of pulled out from the conversations that they were watching. One thing that really struck me when I went to the first masterclass that happened, and it was somebody said something about deciding to listen. When you're having these conversations, decide to listen, and that really stuck with me. So we wanted to understand the immediate impact, and we asked delegates to complete an evaluation form. 94% said that they would recommend. Of those that didn't, which was only 3, they were expecting more detailed medical management. And we reflected on this as a team and felt that the marketing material had accurately reflected what we were trying to get across, the course content. The emphasis for us was about having conversations. It wasn't about medical management. 84% rated it as excellent or good. And we also asked professionals to share action points that they were going to take away from the event. So some examples of those were to use the techniques at the next opportunity, share learning with their colleagues, and to go away and research the resources that they'd heard about on the day. We also asked them to rate their confidence levels before and after the event, and it was interesting to note that those who were low in confidence to start with reported a 100% shift. They moved up the scale. But those that were already quite confident, they took different things away, things like sharing experiences and having the opportunity to listen to others. And here's just a few examples of what professionals said about the masterclass. So real conversations are messy. It's helpful to analyse them. And the one at the bottom there, it provides a real way of learning and applying in the clinical world. Some people are a bit scared of role play, and this was a really good alternative. So it was kind of still practical, but you weren't actually having to do it yourself, and you could sort of observe and think, go away and reflect on it. So what next? So we asked delegates to share their contact details if they were happy to be contacted, to be interviewed, to evaluate the impact on practice if there is any. And the facilitators are very keen to write this project up for publication so that the learning can be shared more widely. So take-home messages. So professionals really appreciated taking the time out of clinical practice to consider this topic in depth. These events were very popular. They were fully booked within a short space of time, and we're actually planning to have 2 more events next year due to demand. We learned quite early on that the professionals attending these events had quite a good understanding of MND already, and we initially pitched it a little bit too low. So it's about knowing your audience. And we were able to adjust and change as we moved with the masterclasses to make sure that we were hitting the kind of right level. There was quite a thirst for more detailed knowledge around the pathophysiology of respiratory failure. And we also decided to offer some pre-learning for people that were attending the later masterclasses. And that was by way of reading resources on our website and video content around end-of-life and palliative care. So all the events were different, and it was important that we were able to respond to the specific needs of each group. And by looking at what they identified as the challenges and the benefits, we were able to gauge that quite well from the start. So finally, if you would like to know more about the Real Talk project, Becky is happy to be contacted. Her details are here on the slide. And you can also find out more about Real Talk via the website link, which is there. So thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
There's a question in the center here.
Where am I going?
Oh, you can't see.
Hi. Who did you get to run the masterclasses? You said you got consultants, so how did you decide that?
Yeah, well,
Sorry if I missed it.
No, it's okay. So the three photographs that were on the slide there. So it was Christina Fall, Professor Christina Fall, Idris Baker and Becky. So both Christina and Idris work very closely with the association. Idris is a member of our clinical advisory group. He's also co-director of one of our care networks. So we know they have a kind of vast knowledge in this area. So that's how we decided, yeah.
There's a question in the front.
A tough one. You rated the satisfaction of the participants. Is there any data on, I guess, the satisfaction or the improvement that the patient population felt from clinicians who had and had not, or of the clinicians who had attended the course?
Yeah, like I said, we would like to do follow-up with the clinicians, but no, that's a really interesting area. I'm not sure how you would... I guess we have our tracking survey, which is the one that I mentioned. It's called Improving MND Care Survey, where we ask each year about people's different experiences of end of life. And we might see a difference there, potentially. Yeah.
I have a question.
Don't make it hard.
It won't be hard. When you say you open it up, is it to every clinician who works with anyone? Like, do you have to, like, who is it open up
So when
to?
we marketed the events, it was directed particularly at people working with people with MND, and we didn't state what profession they had to be. It could be any level. So we had a lot of OTs, a lot of speech and language therapists, a few doctors, but it was mainly nurses and OTs. But there was no kind of, you can't come, but you can.
Yeah, that's another question over there.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation, Rachel. My question's about some of those techniques that you listed: active listening, use of eye contact, silence. I'm just wondering, from your work, would you care to reflect on perhaps any differences that you've noticed in terms of religious, cultural or linguistic background with people? So for some people, communication occurs very differently. And in some cultures, the idea of a health professional looking at someone directly in the eye may have a different effect. So I'm just wondering, has there been any kind of difference on the basis of background in terms of those sort of belief systems?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't think it's one that I can answer, if I'm honest. I guess, we have diverse cultures in the UK, and the consultants that were facilitating those events would probably have experiences of working with different cultures, but it wasn't something we didn't pick out, or I don't remember there being any discussion around that at the events. But I see where you're coming from, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.